Hi everyone, welcome to THT, and today this is part 3 of my first impression video about a Lawless time. Big thanks to Card Market for sponsoring this video. Before we get into the video, disclaimer again, this is only my first impression, haven't played with any of those cards, so my opinion is worth what it's worth, and you take an even bigger grain of salt than usual, because because obviously we're going to be post-rotation meta is going to be a completely different environment, which makes evaluating cards even more difficult than usual. Despite that, I will try my best, and I gotta say that this time around, I've given out a lot of thumbs up. I don't remember giving that many thumbs up and that many amazing in one video. Honestly, the batch of cards we got this week is excellent. There is some stinkers as usual, but there's a lot of very good cards in there. Getting on first with our good old Darth Vader leader. Obviously, I think it seems like FFG wants to reprint those iconic characters in every set and make sure that, not every set, but every rotation, make sure that no matter what premiere format we're going with, there's always going to be some iconic characters that you can play. This time around, Vader is going to be centered around the self-discard synergy. His leader ability is very bad because discarding a card just to deal 1 damage is usually not worth it. If you compare this to the old leader from Spark of Rebellion, instead of discarding a card, you spend 1 resource and you deal 1 damage to a unit and the base. Much better in my view. This one requires you to discard a card, which is not as big of a cost in this game that it is in other card game, but I still think that discarding a card is a bigger cost than spending a resource most of the time. It really depends on the ability, but most of the time. And then the Vader deploy is interesting because you can discard any number of cards to deal that much damage to a unit or base. So basically, I think the way I see Vader is that there's basically 2 ways to play it. The first way is to use it the way it's meant to be used, which is kind of combining it with some effects that wants to be discarded. So sometimes bonuses on synergies around self-discard in order to make the downside of discarding a card an upside, and then using the ability very often to deal damage and discard cards. The second way to use Vader, in my view, is to try to set up some sort of OTK deck where you're going to be trying to draw a bunch of cards throughout the game, then you're going to be deploying your leader, and then attack with it, discard your entire hand, and deal 1,000,000 damage. So there's a couple of ways you can take advantage of this. So obviously red is the color of card draw, so you can basically set up a lot of card draw in your deck. And then you can play a card like Aggressive Negotiation. Not only the card draw allow you to build up your hand, but also allow you to find the Aggressive Negotiation, which is the way you would deal a bunch of damage. You play Aggressive Negotiation on your leader. Let's say you got 7 cards in hand. You play Aggressive, you got 6 cards. That's 12 damage. And then you discard the rest of the card and you can basically deal 18 damage. And also 7 cards in hand is not impossible to do. It's something that you can do relatively easily if you have a lot of card draw in your deck and you're playing some sort of like control deck with a lot of card draw. And this could be a really interesting approach. You could also, if you're afraid of something killing your Vader, you could play Cinta as a plot card to make sure that you can, in one motion, get to deploy Vader and attack at the same time, make sure the combo does not get disturbed. So the problem with this strategy, and I think the reason why it's not viable, is because that means you can't really use your leader ability at all, because discarding cards from your hand would be counter synergistic, so you would want to use this ability as little as possible. And that means you basically have no leader ability, you're spending a lot of resource drawing cards, otherwise the combo doesn't work, and you got a 7 cards deploy leader. So I don't think that's a realistic game plan against anything that is just a little bit aggressive. Not only that, there's a lot of ways to actually counter your Vader combo thing. Just literally a Sentinel would just do it, would force you already to play a removal to make sure the path is clear for Vader. So, and even then, it doesn't really deal enough damage to really kill something outright. You would need to have dealt some significant damage early in the game. And suddenly you realize that this is just not realistic in a game of Star Wars Limited to do all those things. Anyway. So I think if you want to use this leader, you're going to have to use the other route, which is kind of having cards that emphasize on self-synergies and self-discard. Obviously, I'm always judging cards from the card pool we currently have. And from the card pool we currently have, there simply isn't enough enablers. There's not enough payoffs for this. So you got an enabler here, which is your self-discard enabler, which is Vader himself, but then there's just not really enough payoff for this to work out. So I'm happy to be wrong, to be proven wrong, and maybe FFG will print enough of those payoffs to make a real deck around this, but so far it does not really exist. So for now, I'm gonna give this one the lowest rating possible. Moving on, we got Shadow Cloaking. So Shadow Cloaking is a new way you can ready a unit of any size, just like Bravado used to be able to. Bravado is rotating out, so Shadow Cloaking is effectively the new Bravado, but Bravado is a card that's so competitive play, but it has a major advantage over Shadow Cloaking is like its single aspect requirement. Because you got to understand that Bravado is already a very situational card that you really want for very specific decks. But the fact that it was single aspect was allowing you to basically play this card kind of whatever you want. Shadow Cloaking has a triple aspect requirement, which means that it's going to be very, very narrow in the type of deck you can actually play it. Not only that, you actually have to pay 5 resource for it instead of 3, which is a pretty big deal. It does give a shield, which is nice, but it's not always relevant. So, in my view, it does a pretty good job, and I think that the fact that it costs 5 is not a big deal because usually you want to use Bravado as a kind of a finisher. So the fact that it costs 5 is not the end of the world, and the shield is a very nice addition. But I just think that the triple aspect requirement just going to make this card just a little bit too niche. So I'm giving this one a maybe, because obviously there's always a chance there might be a deck that can use that. Because it's not a bad card. It's just, I think that the effect combined with the aspect requirement is going to make it very difficult for this card to see a wide amount of play. Moving on, we got the card That's Rock, and this card basically deals 1 damage for 1, which is pretty horrible, but you can basically produce the same effect if you discard this card from hand, and then you don't even have to pay the resource cost. So obviously this card is meant to be used as a payoff for self-discard synergy, namely Vader. So you can use Vader's ability, and you can deal 2 damage or 1 damage to 2 different units, for example. That can be really nice. So I think this card is obviously good in the Vader deck, but on its own is not enough to make Vader viable. So it's going to need a lot more, there's going to be a lot more discard payoff needed for this to be a real thing. So I don't think this card is playable anywhere else. You really have to be running the self-discard synergy for this to be any good. So I'm going to give this one a maybe, and its playability is going to depend entirely on whether there is some sort of self-discard synergy that happens. But if it does happen, I think this card is pretty good. Moving on to the card that every single control player was looking forward to say, that is the single reactor ignition. This is the new Super Laser Blast, but it's actually better than Super Laser Blast, and that's something that really caught me off guard. I was not expecting FFG not only to I was expecting them to give us some sort of mass removal effect, but I was not expecting this mass removal effect to be better than Super Laser Blast. It is better, but because it deals some damage to the enemy base, and it can deal a significant amount of damage, but obviously the inconvenience is that it has a triple aspect requirement. So overall, I think this card is obviously amazing, and if you're playing blue, red, black control deck, this card is not only going to be the card you're going to be automatically adding to your deck, it's probably going to be the most important card of your deck. So that's obviously very, very good. I honestly don't think, in the context of a control deck, I actually don't think that the damage you deal to the opponent base is that big of a deal. But once again, Super Laser Blast is just such an essential, this sort of effect is such an essential part of what make a control deck function, that obviously just for that reason alone, this card is going to see a tremendous amount of play. And the extra damage is always a nice little bonus. That might actually allow control to be a little bit more aggressive in the later state of the game, other than just winning with vigilance, which you know is rotating out. So I'm really glad that we are moving away from just the milling win condition, which is honestly the most boring way to defeat someone, but rather a more proactive and a more interesting and fun way to kill the opponent, which is just using your units and attacking. So I think I'm glad that we are moving into that direction for control. And I'm also very glad that FFG is actually willing to support a control strategy. At some point, I was a little bit afraid that they wouldn't give us any control strategy, because obviously we got a lot of control card out of set 1 and basically nothing since then. I mean, very little since then. And look like in this set, between this card and also the Lawbringer, they're willing to give control some tools to exist in the game, which I think is positive for the game. I might make a separate video to explain why it is important to have a control deck in a trading card game. That's not the theme of this video, but yeah. Other than that, obviously, what's the disadvantage is obviously the fact that its triple requirement is going to be super restrictive as far as the control decks that you can build. Like, if they don't give us any other viable mass removals, basically control is going to be locked behind that color combo. Basically, control in set 1 and control basically in the previous Premier format was entirely locked behind black-blue. And the reason was very simple, is because you can't play a control deck without Super Laser Blast. And that's a bit of a bummer, because I think that it would be fun to have a wider variety. I think people would maybe be a bit more happy. I mean they would bear a bit more playing against control if there were a wider variety of different control decks. And the thing is, like, Super Laser Blast, really, the fact that they only put in good control card in that color combo meant that it was very difficult to build a control deck outside of those colors. And I really hope that they would make it so you can play a wider variety of different control decks. And it seems like that with this triple respect requirement, they're actually going to do the exact opposite. It's going to be even more restrictive than before to allow you to build a control deck. You're going to have to build red, black, blue if you want to build a control deck. It seems. So obviously, I reserve my final judgment until we see a full set, but that's a bit, I think, is a bit unfortunate. So on one hand, I'm happy that we're getting a great control card, and I'm happy to see that playing control is going to be possible after rotation. On the other hand, I'm just a little bit sad that it's going to be restricted to a very, very specific aspect requirement, which I think is going to be damaging to the variety of different decks you can build. So needless to say, of course, I'm going to give this card the amazing rating. This card is going to have a major impact on the meta, I believe. So obviously it deserves the amazing rating, and it's nice to see a legendary. I think this is the first. I mean, I did give amazing to Lawbringer, but I with further thinking, I think this card really deserved a thumbs up. So this is officially the first legendary that I give the amazing rating to in this set, which, as we know, legendaries are very important for the financial viability of the game. We'll talk about this a little bit later. Shiofane is the next card. This card is pretty okay. It's a 2/4 for 2. And make your opponent, both players, draw cards. So obviously there is some synergy here with aggressive negotiation again. This card, it seems to be, is going to be coming back over and over again. You obviously basically draw your own cards, and you can punch like a rock with this card in late game. It also has two very relevant traits, Underworld and Bounty Hunter. So this card is an easy thumbs up for me. It's going to be narrow in which deck it can play, but it has decent stats. It has an ability that can be very relevant to certain decks. So for me, it's a good card. Moving on, we got Rose, a new Rose Tycho. And this card is actually pretty sweet. This obviously reminds us of the Corellian Hounds, that 5/5/5 that comes to play ready. But this one, I would say that the Corellian Hounds is really dependent on what your opponent is doing, while Rose Tycho is more basically dependent on your own deck. So while Corellian Hounds is more like a sideboard card, I think Rose Tycho can be played in the main deck if you have happen to build a deck that has a lot of non-unique units. In which case, 5/5/5 that comes to play ready, that's pretty fantastic. So I think this card is a pretty easy thumbs up for me. It's a really, really solid card. Moving on, we got Big Skeleen. This card is pretty sweet. First of all, really decent stat, a 4/5/4, single aspect requirement, which means that it can be played in a wide variety of decks. And basically allows you to discard card for credit tokens. So something that you gotta understand about Star Wars Unlimited, something that I've always said, is that Star Wars Unlimited is a game where tempo is more important than card advantage. So you are more than willing to give up cards from your hands in order to basically get more resources. And the perfect example of this is obviously Han Solo, the first Han Solo, which basically gives up card in order to get more resource. And Big Skeleen does exactly that. It discards card from your hand to create credit tokens. And it does it when played, so immediate impact on the game. And it also does it every time it attacks. And it also has decent stats. It's a really, really solid card. it's even better if you get some discard synergy, but I think that even without discard synergy, I think the card is really good. It's also going to allow you to enable a card like Anakin Skywalker. Self-discard can really help you doing it when you can discard heroism units. So for me, this is a really thumbs up. I don't think it's like, I don't know if it's like amazing because this card that comes relatively late. Giving credit tokens that late in the game might not be as amazing, but I still think it's a really solid card. It's definitely, it's a thumbs up, and I think it's a thumbs up. It's on the higher end of thumbs up that I've given. Moving on, we fall from one of the best cards we've seen to one of the worst cards we've seen. Bro, Jesus Christ, this card is bad. Already, you spend 2 resources and you exhaust your own unit. You better have a solid effect to sell me on this. And unfortunately, the effect is pretty bad. Just exhaust enemy unit for each aspect the card you exhausted has. So it's basically going to exhaust 2 enemy units. And it has to be in the same arena. This card is one of the worst cards in the game. It's one of the worst cards in the game. It's so incredibly bad. Ugh. I wish I had something worse than this. This is honestly one of the worst cards in the game. Even in limited, you won't play this. It's incredibly bad. Moving on to another new leader, it is Jyn Erso. Her ability basically allows you, if you have a rebel that was defeated, you can pay 1, look at the top 3, put a card in your hand, and draw it, and you get a deployment 3/6, and the ability is basically the same on attack, but without having to spend resource. So, what do I think about this card? So first of all, I think the ability is not great, because one of the things, right, is that whenever you have an ability, right, that requires resources to be used, you don't want this ability to be situational, because what's going to happen is that often you're not going to be wanting to use that ability because you want to play on curve, right? So already by that itself, the ability is going to be relatively rare. But on top of this, the fact that there is a condition that requires for your opponent to do something means that he actually might do it when you are tap out. So even in the cases where you would have been able to use that ability, you might not be able to because your opponent just killed it after you were tap out, because you didn't have the resource available at the time your opponent did it. So I think that the ability, even though paying 1 to draw a card among 3 cards sounds very sweet on paper, the condition and the cost combined mean that you're really rarely going to be able to use that. And adding on top of this, the friendly unit has to be a rebel, so there's also a deck building restriction attached to this as well. So I think the leader ability is not great. And then unfortunately, when you have a leader ability that is not great, usually you want to combine it with, you want to make up for this with a leader that has really good stat when it comes out. The problem is that's not the case for Jyn Erso. She got a 3/6 stat line for 5, which is below what you want for a leader that has a relatively mediocre leader ability. So, in my opinion, the leader ability is not good. The leader is not great. The stats are not great, and there's a strong deck building requirement for the leader to work. All this combines mean that I don't think this is a really good card. There's a couple of interesting synergy, of course, with the card. Again, the ability to draw a card can be paired with aggressive negotiations for some great effect, and the Jyn Erso will have an easy time enabling Rey, as she can basically pick up any card out of the top 3, so you can basically draw Rey like this and get yourself some free damage. So there's some sweet synergy, and I think if she ever sees plays, it's probably going to be in red. But I just think that even if you build your deck around it, the ability is too situational to actually work in a real game of Star Wars Unlimited. So, for example, if you compare this to ability like Cassian from set 1, Cassian can way easier draw card because you only need to do 3 damage to the base, which is something that you can kind of predict most of the time when you're going to be able to do it or not. While this one is a lot more unpredictable, it's a lot more difficult to actually to actually predict whether or not you're going to use a rebel unit and then plan your turn around this, because you have to plan your turn around this because there's a resource cost to this card. So I don't think this card is good enough. Even though there's some sweet synergy with it, I don't think it's good enough. Moving on, we got the new Body Rook. This card is pretty sweet, 2/4 for 2 rebel, and it has a really powerful on attack ability that allows you to give Sentinel to a rebel, and he can give Sentinels to himself. So just a really solid card. Any card that is basically a 2/4 for 2 with an extra upside is gonna be playable. Is gonna be relatively playable. Obviously, there are some 2/4 that are better than others, but this one is honestly pretty good. And it's not like there's this is the blue-white is a color combination that has a lot of strong 2-drops anyway. Moving on, we get into Rogue One, and this card is pretty awful, which is pretty hard to understand why this card's so bad, because it's a 3/3 for 3. You look at the top 2 cards of your deck, put any numbers of them at the bottom of your deck, and on top. So it's basically top deck manipulation, which does have some synergies, but the stat line is so incredibly bad, and the fact that the effect is when a friendly unit is defeated is also not great. I just don't think it's a very good effect for such a bad stat line. It's not unplayable, but I don't think it's good enough for constructed. Obviously, there might be some strong synergy with this card, in which case I might revise my judgment. Moving on, we have a very interesting and unique card. It is called From a Certain Point of View. So basically what this card does is you can ignore all aspect penalties and then paying 1 instead. So basically you are kind of paying 1 for your aspect penalty instead of 2, but you're also spending an extra card. Honestly, as sweet as this card is, I think this card was not meant to be played for constructed. I think it's more of a limited card that you might put in your deck as a filler in order to give more chance to actually play your out of aspect card, if you have any, maybe in sealed. But yeah, it's not good at all for constructed. It's not playable at all for constructed. Spending an extra resource and paying a cost in order to play an out of aspect card is absolutely not worth it. And not only that, what happened if you draw that out of aspect card without this card, and what happened if you draw this card without the other aspect card? Whenever you have a card that requires another card for this to work, either 2 of the card needs to be really good taken separately, or they need to produce a very powerful effect when they combine together. And this is neither of those things. The effect is not very powerful when you combine them together, and drawn separately, those 2 cards are absolutely awful. Moving on, we got the Scarif Lieutenant. This card is obviously a direct reminder to the Vanguard Infantry. Works only on Rebels, has slightly better stat line. I think 2/1 for 1 is better than 1/2 for 1, but also double respect requirements. Vanguard Infantry basically saw extremely little play, so I personally don't think, unless there's some specific synergies around this card in the set, I think it's unlikely to see play. Then we get the Syndicate Spice Runner, which is basically a worth version of Mon Mothma. Not only you only dig up to 3 cards in the deck, it also is a 2/2 stat line instead of a 1/3, which I think is worse. I think a 1/3 is better than a 2/2 most of the time. So I would say that I don't think this card is good. I'm gonna give this one a maybe, because if you are in a very control meta and you have a very underworld deck, you might actually want to play this. But I think it's unlikely to see play. So I'm giving it's a generous maybe. Moving on to Double Cross. So this card is pretty reminiscent to Shoe's Side. It's cost 1 less, but it also gives a credit token for the difference in cost between the unit you've stolen and the unit that you've given. That's a pretty big downside, and the fact that it costs 6 is pretty nice. Instead of 7 is pretty nice. So overall, I think it is worse than Shoe's Side, but I don't think it's worse enough that it will see no play. And I still think that if you're looking for that kind of effect, it might see. Obviously, if Shoe's Side was playable in Premiere, whenever Double Cross would be printed, I would say this card is unplayable. It's just strictly worse than. It's just pretty much worse than Shoe's Side. But since Shoe's Side is going to rotate out, Double Cross might have a chance to see play. So I'm going to give this one a maybe. Moving on to the Axe Forgets. This card is very reminiscent to Clear the Field. It is worse because it doesn't bounce the card with the same name, but it also has a more forgiving aspect requirement. I can definitely see a deck wanting to play this card. Historically, Clear the Field has not seen much play because people usually prefer to run bounce that can bounce larger units, notably with Weequay, and even after rotation, Beguile, which bounce card that costs 6 or less, will be legal. So I think Beguile is really going to see a lot more play than the Axe Forget, but I still think there might be some cases where you might need to play a bounce that costs 2, so I'm gonna give this one a maybe. Moving on, we got Jyn Erso. Finally a triple aspect requirement that really is worthy of the triple aspect requirement. I mean, we saw the new Super Laser Blast earlier, but this one is another one that really, in my view, firmly deserves the triple aspect requirement. Jyn Erso she's incredible. She basically is a 2/2 that gives an experience to a token to a unit, and she can give the experience token to herself. So she's basically a Battlefield Marine, but she's much better than a Battlefield Marine because she also can give an experience to someone else, which might be so relevant when sometimes you're just gonna play her, put the experience on another unit. And if that was not flexible enough, she also has the power of actually being played to exhaust an enemy unit. So she's basically a Leia and a Battlefield Marine combined. So she's just incredibly flexible, extremely good turn 1 box with 3-3-4-2 is nice. Good later on in the game to give an experience to a token and give yourself a better trade. Very good, even in super late game whenever you want to exhaust a giant units. This card is so incredibly flexible, and it's also a rebel, which is a nice little addition. Obviously, the only downside of this card is that she's gonna be triple aspect requirement, which is gonna strongly limit in which decks you can actually play her. But I think she's good enough to see a significant amount of play, and the fact that her ability is a when play means that she will synergize really well with Qui-Gon Jinn, so you could basically build a Qui-Gon Jinn green and really get some really nice value with her. So I'm gonna give this one an amazing. Maybe giving an amazing to a triple aspect requirement card is a bit risky because her impact on the meta might not be as significant because she's very dependent on whether or not this aspect combination is going to be good. But the card is too powerful for me to not give that rating. Really, really strong card. This card is an absolute no-brainer auto-include in every green cunning heroism deck you could build. Next, we got another very, very powerful card. This is Cinta Cass. She's a 3/5 for 3 rebel, again, relevant trait. She doesn't have a triple aspect requirement. She's going to make it easy to play. So she has obviously amazing stats. 3/5 is the best stats you could hope for a card of this cost. And she also has a pretty powerful ability. She does gain Sentinel as soon as she's get upgraded. And it's not difficult to upgrade a unit. You could literally play a card that gives an experience token, and that's it. She's upgraded and she can get Sentinel. So even if you're playing a deck that... I think it's relatively unlikely that you're going to be playing a deck that does no way to upgrade it. But even then, there's just so many ways to upgrade units in this game. She really gets Sentinel very easily. And even if you don't, she's still a 3/5 for 3, which is very respectable. I think this card is amazing. It's really, really powerful. I think it's on the same power level that Obi-Wan, the 3/5 for 3 Sentinel. Obviously, Obi-Wan only gets Sentinel when it comes to play, while she gets Sentinel permanently when she's got upgraded. But so they're a bit different, but I think she's kind of on the same realm of playability, and we see Obi-Wan seeing play almost everywhere nowadays. So I think she's really, really good. Next, we got the Kitana, and this card is pretty sweet. It's a 2/4 for 3, so it's not easy to kill. Obviously, doesn't have great stats, but that's because she has this card has a very powerful ability, allow you to reduce the cost of next Underworld unit. So you could play this as a 3 and then play an Underworld unit for that costs 1 for free after. So direct immediate impact. And if the opponent doesn't kill it, then it can start attacking, and reducing the cost of your next unit can be really, really powerful. A little bit like the GNK droid that we've seen. But this one is, in my opinion, a lot more difficult to kill. Only works for Underworld units, obviously, so you need to play this in the Underworld deck. But I believe in this case, I'm going to give this one a thumbs up. And the fact that it has the when play cost reduction is also kind of a big deal as well. So I think Kitana is likely to see play. I think this card is pretty good. Next one, we got the A-Maker. This card really reminds me, it's kind of like a mini Craving Power. You're giving +1/+1 instead of +2/+2. To me, the big issue with this card is that you can only target enemies in the same arena. And for me, this is a pretty big deal because one of the purpose of removals is to be able to kill cross arena. It's to be able to defeat stuff cross arena. Usually whenever I want to defeat something in the same arena, I either use the unit I already have on board or I use my Sentinels. And green really has no shortage of Sentinels. So usually when I'm playing a removal in a green deck, I want this removal to be able to operate cross arena. So This is to me the very, very big downside. With that being said, the card is close enough in power level compared to Craving Power that I think it might see play, so I'm going to give this one a maybe, and obviously it has the fact that it can be played in both Heroism and Villainy. Moving on to Weequay Parrot. Weequay Parrot is basically an interesting card. A 2/3 for 2 Saboteur is not great, but it can be played with no resources. If it's played for free, basically, thanks to another ability, you can play it for 3/4. So this card, honestly, impossible to say if it's going to see play or not. It's all going to come down on the amount of synergy there is around it. Unfortunately, most of the synergies that would allow you to play this card for free are currently going to be rotating out. The biggest example is probably Ewing Reinforcement or cards like Cop Veins. Those cards would have allowed you to play this card for free as a 3/4. Unfortunately, those cards are rotating out. So right now, I don't exactly know how you can actually run this card, but it might be possible to do so. Moving on, we got the Massa CC Group Marines. So we got some quite a few 4/4 for 3s, 4/4 for 3 in Villainy, with notably Knight of Ren and also with General Grievous. But we didn't have any in Heroism, and I believe that the 4/4 stat lines has become a lot better since Legend of the Falls, and it's getting even better after Secrets of Power, and I believe it's going to continue to be like this for Lawless time. And the reason why is because there's just so many great 2-drops which has a 2/4 stat lines, and the 4/4 obviously do an amazing job at getting rid of those 2/4s. So the 4/4 stat line has just became a lot better, and now the fact that we got access to this stat line in Heroism is going to be kind of a big deal. It's also Rebel Trooper, which are a relevant trait. So I think this card is a thumbs up. I think it has no ability, but just the stat line itself is going to allow it to clear out those 2/4s, which I believe are still going to be a strong presence in the meta. And I think this is the reason why it's going to see play. Moving on, we got Common Cause. It's one of these temporary buffs that we see in green. Unfortunately, Fantasy Flight game still hasn't been able to find the right way to create those effects. Those effects are almost always overpriced. This card basically can give up to a +3/+3 maximum, which is just horrible for 2 resource spent, and that's the base case scenario. I mean, it's not the best case scenario, I guess, because it's among all the units you control, but even then, it's just not a good card. Moving on to the Black Sun Kabbalist. Yeah, basically the problem is 2-drops that basically aren't good played on turn 1 really need to be amazing to be playable, and that's really not the case of the Black Sun Kabbalist. It has bad stat, the ability is not that powerful, and it also has a trait requirement which makes it even more difficult to use. It's just simply not a good card. Next, we come from a really bad card to an amazing card, and that's the Black Sun Patroller. This card is probably one of the best space 2-drop in the entire game. It just simply is amazing. Basically, we know that 2/2 shielded for 2 are incredible. Every time FFG release a 2/2 for 2 shielded, whether it's Crafty Smuggler, Krennic, or Secretive Sage, those 2-drops end up seeing a massive amount of praise. Secretive Sage was the most played card of Legend of the Falls. Those cards are just basically incredible. And we know that usually space units are always kind of a worse deal than ground unit, but this is basically costed like a ground unit but in space. It's incredibly powerful to have a 2/2 shielded in space. It's very difficult to get rid of, which means that this card at the very minimum is going to be a 2-drop that's going to deal damage every turn. It's going to be very difficult to get rid of, or it's going to be a great vessel for you to put an upgrade on it. And obviously we know that vehicles in space have great upgrade, which are called pilots. So we got, of course, Dengar, for example, that will trigger the Underworld on attack ability, as well as giving additional stats. And we, of course, have the king of villainy pilots in that color combination with Darth Vader with a +3/+3 that attacks already. There's also the other girl, like the one that gives 3/3 shield. Unfortunately, she's not as amazing with Black Sun because he already has a shield, so giving double shield doesn't really do that much. Really, the best pilot you can put on the Black Sun Patroller is going to be Vader. Very difficult to counter if you don't have very specific cards. And yeah, so it's just an incredible card. It's obviously going to be great in Gar Saxon Yellow in Eternal. but even in obviously in Premiere, it's going to be amazing as well. So for me, this is amazing. It's one of the best 2-drop we've seen. And yellow-black is a color combination that doesn't have access to a lot of great 2-drops. So this is also another great thing. And if that was not enough, the card is also Underworld, which is, as we know, is a trait that's going to matter in this set. Going from an amazing card to, let's put it that way, a less amazing card is the Shipbreaking Yard. This card is... I don't understand what's going on with bases in this set, but they are awful. I mean, the common base are not bad, but pretty much every rare base they've put in so far are just completely horrible. This one, basically epic action, you discard 3 cards from your deck, you return a card, discard it this way, and put it on top of your deck. It's not even drawing you a card. Like, it's so incredibly bad. Obviously, there's some positional synergies with discard synergies and stuff, but honestly, even if Palpatine Return was still going to be legal after rotation, this would still be a horrible card and not worth it at all. So I think even if you are playing a deck that is some sort of reanimator deck, that even then it's only going to mill 3 cards, so it's not very reliable. So it's pretty awful. It's a horrible card in general. But even in a deck that does synergize with the Stockpile, the effect is not that significant for something that makes you lose 4 fucking HP on your base. That's a lot. So it's obviously unplayable. Moving on to the 3 Remembers. This card is one of the new removals that we're getting that is also going to be very helpful for control. And this one is really not bad. So you would think, yeah, spending 4 resources to kill something like a 3 or less is pretty bad. But the fact that it also makes the unit lose all ability is very relevant. There's actually a lot of cards in the game that really are so much easier to deal with once you basically take out their abilities. So thinking about Mina Bonteris, she's not going to be able to draw. Obviously, Karius Nemik won't be able to give you like a spy token. Night Sister Warrior won't be able to draw you a card. And obviously, you're spending a 4 to kill a 2-drop, so it's not really amazing. But I think in control, it's still going to be fine. And obviously, it's a great counter to Chewbacca. Once, of course, Chewbacca in pilot mode, you play Chewbacca in pilot mode onto a space unit. You have actually something that can answer it for only 4 resource. That's 1 resource less than the other answer that control added to Chewbacca, which was non-glorious result. And being able to answer Chewbacca 1 turn earlier is a pretty big deal. So in my view, this card, I give it a thumbs up. It's not a flashy card, it's not an amazing card, but it just answers a lot of things that are problematic for control, and I think for that reason alone, it will still play. If it's not a main deck, at least it will still play in the sideboard. Moving on now to Jyn Erso, which is a very unique card because it's a card that you give to your opponent whenever you play it. And it gives the enemy units, which is you in this case, because you're playing a card, you give it to your opponent, basically Red 1 and Saboteur. So, on face value, this card is not amazing because it's very situational. You're spending 3 resources just to give Saboteur and Red 1 to your units, which is something that really honestly matters if you got a relatively wide board and your opponent has a Sentinel units. But if you do, the advantage of this card is like it's very difficult to counter. If you compare this to something like an upgrade, like Infiltrator skill, that can give Saboteur and +1/+1 to a unit. Yes, it only costs 1, but there's multitude of ways to counter it. You can upgrade removal, your opponent can just simply kill the unit that has it. While this is a lot difficult to answer because obviously opponents could play exhausted. So all you need now of Red 1 Saboteur, they can just attack base, and they also get a bonus attack as well. And for the opponent to actually kill the Jyn Erso, it's going to take him time because he's going to have to attack into your units. Most likely it will take him almost 2 turns to do that. And by that time, you might have just won the game. So, I honestly don't know if this card is going to see play. Once again, it's a very situational effect, and if it sees plays, it's going to be a sideboard card for sure. Spending 3 resources for that is tough, but in the right situation, it can solve your problem, and it's very hard to counter. Like, I don't see many ways for your opponent to be able to get rid of it, unless he obviously plays like some sort of self-sacrifice strategy or something. But I think most decks won't have an easy way to get rid of Jyn Erso, which means that you will benefit from the bonus from a significant amount of time, when normally those kind of effects, whether they're on units or on upgrades, would be much easier for the opponent to answer. So I'm going to give this one a maybe. Moving on to Fear and Dead Men. This card is supposed to be a payoff for the Vader, for the new Vader. Unfortunately, I think it's pretty garbage. Like, in order to be able to really get this card to a price that is decent, I think you need to at least make it cost 5. I think that's 6 cost still too expensive. As opposed to Bombing Run, which can choose which arena it's going. This one can only target ground, which is pretty bad. I think one of the main reasons why people play Bombing Run is because you can choose which arena it's going. So 4 damage to ground units is not... It's a very situational card, and you really have to be playing a specific deck for you to pay this for a really significant discount. And I think a self-discard card won't be able to basically give it more than 1 or 2 cost of a discount. So I just don't find this to be particularly appealing. And if this is the kind of support they're going to give to the new Vader, I don't have big hopes for the leader. Moving on to another legendary, that's the Persecutor. It's the second Star Destroyers that we are going to be seeing for this expansion. And this one is pretty strong. So it's actually pretty similar to the one that we already seen, the Lawbringer, as it is a big spaceship that has a wind blade that deals damage to a wide amount of units. It's obviously more powerful than the Lawbringer because it's 3 damage instead of -2, -2. And instead of doing things on one aspect, you actually choose the arena in which it deals the damage. It also deals each damage to each unit is not only the opponent unit, but it also has a +2 attack bonus. And it costs 9 instead of 8, obviously. So, what do I think about this? I personally think that it's going to depend on the meta, of course, but I think I'm more optimistic about the Lawbringer. I think Lawbringer is slightly better. The fact that it costs 1 less is a big deal. And the fact that the only effect in enemy units, I think, is also a big deal. And I don't think the fact that Persecutor has 2 extra attack, I don't think that's a big deal. I don't think that makes a huge difference. So overall, I prefer the Lawbringer over the Persecutor. But with that being said, I think if you're going to be playing a control deck, you're probably going to be playing both. Because whenever you're playing a control deck, what you want is you want the right card for the right moment. And in this case, I can definitely see some scenarios where Persecutor is going to be better, and I can see some scenarios where Lawbringer is going to be better. So probably if you're playing a control deck, you probably want to play 2 of each. So obviously there's the synergy with Piet. It's another card that you can play with Piet that will give you this critical mass of capital ship that will make the deck function. So for me, I'm going to give this one a thumbs up. It's going to see play for sure, and it's nice to see, when again, legendary that are actually good. Moving on, we got ourselves a new ramp card. A big question that we all ask ourselves whenever we get into that expansion is whether or not we are going to get ways to ramp, as obviously ramp like resupply and super execution were such a massive part of shaping the meta of Star Wars Unlimited since the very first set. And looks like we're gonna get some sort of ramp. Obviously, it's not as good as Super Laser Technician, which is probably the card that we will compare this to most. The wording is different, but honestly, the effect is pretty much the same. Super Laser Technician put the resource ready, which honestly was never really that big of a deal. Like the fact that Super Laser Technician gives you the ready resource, it was nice, a nice little bonus, and it made the card nice. But overall, it was not like it didn't make like a massive difference. So I wouldn't put this against Expendable Mercenary. What I'm gonna put against Expendable Mercenary is the fact that it obviously costs 4 while Super Extinction costs 3, and that's a massive deal because the whole point of something that costs 3 is that you play it on turn 2, you sacrifice on turn 3, which allows you to get your deploy leader 1 turn faster whenever you get on 5. And this might just be a healthier way to put ramp. Is like ramp will not actually help leader that deploys on 5 to deploy faster, and instead will more be something that you want to play if you're playing something that deploys on 6 or 7. So maybe that's just a new direction they're going to with ramp, which I think is just a little bit healthier. So obviously if you're playing a leader that costs 5 or 6, the fact that the card ramps you on 4 is not the end of the world. We saw even card that like resupply carrier that ramps you on 6 to see play whenever you're playing a 7 deploy leader. So having Expendable Mercenary is not really that big of a deal. It has better stats, which may be an upside as it allows you to have more impact on the game, but it can be a downside as sometimes it can be more difficult to actually kill your own mercenary, which is what you want to do. It has also 2 relevant worlds, the Underworld and Bounty Hunter, which is kind of a big deal. And it has a single aspect requirement, which means it's playable in both eras of Infinity. In my view, this card is obviously not nearly as powerful as Superlative Technician, but honestly, Superlative Technician is one of the best cards in the entire game. So I would still give this card a solid thumbs up. Moving on now to You Hold This. This card, basically, the idea is it's a removal, but it's a removal that that costs 1, but then the extra cost is that you have to give a unit to your opponent. What I don't like about this card is the fact that if you compare this to a card like Open Fire, which costs 3 and deal 4 damage to a unit, this card basically is more situational because you need to have a unit on the same arena as the unit that you want to kill. And that's usually not what you want. Usually you want to use removal to kill units that are on arenas where there's nobody, that are uncontested. That's one of the whole point of the removals. That's the whole point why people play Open Fire, is so they can actually kill units that are not in the same arena as the unit that they're already in play. The second problem of the card is obviously the fact that you have to give control to enemy units. So the best case scenario for this unit is if you have a unit that costs 1. I guess the best scenario if you have a Porg, I guess. But, okay, let's ignore the Porg for now, because are you really going to be playing a Porg just because you're playing this card? I don't think so. But let's say a more realistic scenario is that you have a 1-cost unit. So you're spending a card. Which is the card you're giving to your opponent. You're spending a resource for playing this card, and you're also giving a resource to your opponent. So overall, giving away a 1-cost unit and playing this card is far more expensive than actually spending three resources to play Open Fire. And again, there's the arena restriction. So this card is just incredibly bad in my opinion. In fact, this card is just really, really bad. And I'm just saying this is the best case scenario for this card, because obviously if you got a card that costs any more than this, then it's a lot worse. So this card is absolutely unplayable. I don't think it's good. And it's of course the fact that it's also double aspect requirement is not going to help. Moving on to a more exciting card is the Volcaris Defender. So, what I like about this card that even if you don't discard a card to give them the shield, so actually it's if you discarded a card from your hand or from your deck this phase, you give a shield to this unit. So first of all, there's the self discard and self mill seems to be kind of a theme in this expansion. So I think there's already a significant amount of decks that can basically give this card a shield token right away. There's the Vader, obviously the new Vader, and it's probably going to be way more than this. So, and in which case, of course, 3/3 for 3 shield already by itself is very powerful, and then you have a very powerful on-attack ability on top of all of this. But what makes me confident, even if you don't get good ways to self-discard, even if self-discard is completely unplayable, I still think this card is very playable. Because, think about it, well, okay, 3/3 for 3 is not amazing, but the ability, the on-attack dealing 1 damage to a space unit and exhausted, that's a very, very powerful effect. If you have the initiative, you can really do some really good work with this. So, in my opinion, this card, I'm going to give this one a thumbs up. Yes, it has a very restrictive aspect requirement, so it's obviously going to limit a lot the chances for this card to see play. But I think the card can be really powerful if you have self-discard synergy, and if you don't, I think the card is still likely to be playable. Moving on now to Uruk. I didn't even know this card existed in Star Wars, but hey, here he is. Here we are. So this card is basically kind of a massive beater on 4 that has hidden, so can't really be killed right away. 4 health is not great for 4 drop, but because it's hidden, it's going to be relatively difficult to kill. And whenever it attacks on 6 with rate 4. This card reminds me a lot of Dooku, which had a 5/4 hidden kind of. What makes Dooku better than Uruk is the fact that he also, it's a 5 attack, it's not a rate 4, so whenever your opponent has to attack Dooku, at least it will take 5 damage back. But Uruk deals 1 more damage because his rate 4 also has some relevant trade with Rebel Bounty Hunter, and it also has some resource synergy, of course, with Martian Row, which will be legal after rotation, so you can actually attack for 10 whenever you're attacking with Uruk, which is pretty sweet. So I'm gonna give this one a maybe. I think Doku was very close of being competitive viable, and I've seen some competitive deck running him. Uruk is pretty close in power level to it, and maybe after rotation, as the power level is going to get a bit weaker, maybe Uruk is going to find a spot. And you also have some relevant synergy, so I'm going to give this one a maybe. Before we get to the rest of this video, I just wanted to let you know that you can pick up Stolen AT Olive for €4.45. This card is honestly has been incredibly relevant at the last sector qualifier, and it's also a card that is not going to rotate out, and it's a legendary, so you want to pick it up before it goes up in price. Moving on now to Stockpile. So Stockpile is the other RAM card that FFG is giving us, and it comes into play very late in the game. We know that the later the RAM comes to play, the less relevant it becomes. But as we know from Resupply Carrier, ramp that can come onto 6 can be really powerful. If you happen to have a 7 deploy leader, this can allow you to deploy your leader one turn earlier. And if your leader has a very powerful one play ability, or very powerful to stabilize the game, that is incredibly relevant. Obviously, instead of getting yourself a 4-5 space body, you're going to be able to ramp again. So basically get yourself a double ramp, which is only truly relevant if you're really playing a lot of very, very expensive cards. And obviously, this card is going to be strong if you get yourself an 8 deploy leader. I think if you, right now, after rotation, there's not going to be any 8 cost deploy leader in the game. But obviously, this might not stay the case for very long. And there's going to be definitely going to be plenty of opportunities for FFG to print leader that costs more than 7 in the upcoming time. Actually, there is a leader that costs more than 8. That's the there's Volcaris, actually. Now that I think about it. So yeah, there might be some ways you can use this card to get yourself a good deployment. So I'm giving this one a maybe. I think it has a lot of potential for very, very kind of very focused late game decks. Obviously, you really need to be able to have a leader that has a really strong impact on the game as it deploys. Volcaris might not be enough for this to be real. But if you do, I think the card can be really, really powerful. Moving on to another Star Destroyer. This is the third legendary Star Destroyer that we're seeing this set, which is pretty weird because that's not really... It's supposed to be a Lawless time, not really a Star Destroyer time. But apparently, FFG really want us to play those Star Destroyers. But unfortunately, this one is not good. It's insanely expensive, cost 11. There's really a massive difference between a card that costs 9 and a card that costs 11 in this game, really. And the problem is, oh yes, he has a lot of stats, but the problem is like the when playability is kind of underwhelming. For something that costs 11, you really expect a card to have some sort of insane impact on the game, and that's not the case at all with Intimidator. So he has a very unique effect that allows you... There's basically primarily 2 ways to use this card. You can use this card as a way to draw card, basically getting some cards that you've resourced earlier and put them into your hand. Okay. The second way to use this card is, let's say you're playing some sort of... I think the best way to use this card is, let's say you're playing some sort of combo decks, and there's a really specific card that you really don't want to get discarded. You resource that card earlier, and then you play that card later on to get this card back into your hand. But here we are really getting very, very deep into... we're really getting very, very deep into speculation, and do you really want to do this effect for 11? That's the big question as well. The other way to use this card is like you decide to basically dump away all of your resource, so then you can play another 11 cost card. So let's say you play Intimidator, and then you dump all of your resources, you turn them into credit tokens, and then you play Executor after it. So you're basically playing Intimidator and Executor on the same turn, and you hope that's going to win you the game. The problem is 2 11-11s, even if it spawns a bunch of TIE Fighter, that's against a control deck, that's not necessarily going to win you the game. If you're going to go Super Laser Blast, you've lost the game because you've no resource left, and you're basically leaving with just behind, you're just leaving 3 tokens behind. So I don't think this kind of gamble strategy is really going to work out. Or at least there hasn't been a combo that really can make it work. So he has a very unique effect, so maybe there's a way to use this card in a way that is very busted. But so far, I'm not seeing it. And until then, I'm going to give this card the unplayable, the bad rating. So I don't think this card is good at all. But I would be happy to be proven wrong. And unfortunately, that means that it is yet another legendary that I think is not going to be very good. And I think, honestly, we can all be honest that even if ever there's a way to use this card, it's going to be so incredibly niche that I don't think the card is going to be worth much money anyway. Moving on to Admiral Motti. I really like the card in principle. Unfortunately, I think it's overpriced. Like, giving your leaders plus a unit +2/+2 is pretty powerful, because that means that Admiral Motti effectively has an immediate impact on the game if you get your deploy leader on 5. But again, paying 5 for 4/5 is just really underwhelming. Just to give you kind of an element of comparison, we have a Asajj Ventress, which is kind of have a similar effect. If you're playing a Force leader, let's say you're playing a Force leader that deploys on 5, which is not difficult to do. You can play this like I forgot the name, in Talzin. So you get the +2 attack immediately. And then you get yourself a 5/6 instead of a 4/5, which is a big deal. And even then, Asajj Ventress really doesn't see much play. So I have a hard time seeing Admiral Motti being played because I just think he's just overpriced. Moving on to the last card for today, and we are finishing with a bang with another leader, which is going to be our good old friend, Director Krennic. And I personally really like this leader. First of all, you get the leader ability, you defeat a friendly unit, you create a credit token. Remember, if we compare this to the ability of Palpatine from Spark of Rebellion, Palpatine 1, basically you defeat a friendly unit, you deal 1 damage, you draw a card. I think creating a credit token is better than doing that, because once again, in this game, resource is more important than card draw. And there's actually a lot of very strong units that have very powerful when defeated effect. We called about Night Sister Warrior. We talked about, there's the new 3/3 that ramps you when he dies. There's of course the Owen Lars. There's a significant amount of good cards that have powerful when defeated effect. They can really get value out of this and allow you to play your big cards faster. So I think the leader ability, if you play it in the right deck, is very powerful. I also don't mind his leader deploy. Yes, he deploys on 7, which is a bummer, but he has really good stat, 4/9. He's very similar to, like, if I'm thinking about, okay, what is a good 7 leader deploy? I immediately think about Yoda. Yoda is probably the best 7 deploy leader in the game, by far. And this is fairly similar to Yoda. You get yourself 4/9 for 7, and just like Yoda, he has sort of a removal when it comes to play. So you get, when deployed, another friendly unit deals damage equal to its power to an enemy unit. You can play this, for example, with Cinta or with any other plot unit, so you guarantee to have a unit in play whenever it comes out, and then deal some damage. It might not be as good as Yoda, and also Yoda does have Restore too, so I think the deploy leader Yoda is stronger than Krennic, but Krennic has a stronger ability than Yoda. So I think this card, I'm not saying it's guaranteed to see play, but I think it's very likely to see play, and I'm comfortable enough to see this card is going to see play that I'm willing to give it a thumbs up. And that's it for today. We've basically covered every single card that was revealed this week. There were a lot of them. So now we'll take a look at kind of doing our legendary count. I like to do this because this is something I've said many times in the past, but I think that right now the single most important problem with Star Wars Unlimited is the fact that products are just not desirable, and that's bad for the business, but it's also bad for the experience of opening boosters. I think this if you talk to me, if you tell me if Star Wars Unlimited dies tomorrow, what would be the cause of it? I will say because they were not able to sell enough booster box. And the reason why they're not able to sell booster box is because legendaries are not good enough. And they've said they were going to fix this problem with Lawless time, and now I'm basically seeing if that's going to be the case or not. Obviously, my estimation is worth what it's worth, but this is currently what I think about the different legendaries in the game that have been revealed so far. There's 5 legendaries which I think are not going to see play. There's 1 legendary which I think I'm kind of putting on maybe, I don't really know. 3 legendaries that I'm confident we'll see play, and 1 legendary which I think is going to have a huge impact on the meta. So it's getting better. It's getting better compared to last week, but we'll still have too many legendaries that are junk, in my view. Some people may disagree. Some people might find Chewbacca look better than what I think they are. We'll see who is right in the end, but that's currently my estimation. Let me know in the comments below what you think about the spoilers. Let me know if there's anything that I got wrong. I know that those cards are brand new, so sometimes I don't read them properly. Sometimes I make mistakes, so please let me know. And let me know if you agree or disagree with some of the assessment that I've made throughout this video. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.